with me, and it's a nice opportunity for all of us to have some discussion about ethnography and ethnographic methods. And I believe most of the students have joined, participants. I'm so sorry, I'm using the word students, so used to using this term. Uh, all the participants have joined, or most of them are joining. So in the meantime, I would just introduce myself, although Sir had kindly introduced me to you. I'm Geetika Ranjan, and I'm teaching anthropology at the Department of Anthropology at Northeastern Hill University, Shillong. And today I was sent the list of participants, so I went through it and I realized that most of you are already teaching and different subjects in different universities and colleges, with some of you also pursuing research towards your PhD program. So that gave me an idea about from the diverse fields that you all are coming from. And the common factor that ties all of us together is the fact that what we will discuss today, that is ethnographic methods, that is something which is quite common to basically all endeavors that have anything to do with social sciences. So with that in mind, I would like to start, and I would like to just play my presentation. 1 second. Is the screen visible?
Yes, ma'am, it's visible.
It's visible, right? So I've just put there ethnographic research. I hope that slide can be seen. Uh, can you all see the slide, ethnographic research?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, but not in slideshow mode.
Sorry?
It's not in slideshow mode. Can you slideshow?
Slideshow.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that okay? Is
Yes,
that all
ma'am.
right?
Yes, ma'am.
It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, because I'm also not very techno savvy, so you may have to teach me if I get
No,
stuck
it's
in.
okay. It's okay.
Okay. So, like I said, that today we are going to basically talk about and discuss and talk about ethnography, ethnographic research, or ethnographic methods, which come as an important part of the whole gamut of ethnographic research, which we call ethnographic methods. So, the idea is that I mean, all of you must be familiar with this term, I'm very sure. But if we go and actually to begin with, and we say what exactly is ethnography, then of course it's a qualitative method for collecting data, and it is often used in social and behavioral sciences. Why this term social and behavioral sciences is important is because there is a misconception that when we talk of ethnography, we are restricting it to a very large extent to subjects only like anthropology and sociology. But that was an idea which was valid, say, a couple of decades ago. But today, when we talk about ethnography, we realize its importance, its pertinence, its vital place in any endeavor, any discipline which has anything to do with society, social sciences, with people as such. So, when we talk about ethnographic research, it normally takes a cultural lens. It's a cultural lens through which we view the lives of the people within their communities in their cultural and natural setting. The important thing here is that it's a study. Secondly, it's a qualitative study. Third, it deals with people. It studies people's lives. But where? In their communities, in their natural settings. We don't bring the people to the researcher goes to the people. That's why we say that we try to study people in their natural setting, whether it is the way they are living their normal life in the village, in any locality of a town, while doing work in a factory, while being a corporate person in his company, the way they are. If you have to study people, the way they are going about in their daily life from very close quarters, this becomes an important ingredient of ethnographic research. And that's why we say that we carry out this kind of a research over people in situ. SIT, which I have just mentioned towards the end of this line, it means in their natural setting, the way they are. We don't manipulate our subjects of research. That's very important part of ethnographic research. So when we say that, what is ethnography? Ethnography is both a process and the objective end result. What we do in it, we basically study people where in their natural setting, wherever they are. That means a very important word becomes important here, and that is field and field work. Right? Ethnographic research is basically conducted through field work. Anything can be a field. But researcher goes to the field. The field does not come to the researcher. That's an important ingredient. And important thing is here is that we talk to the subjects of our study. We carry out a study over how they are leading their lives in a face-to-face situation. Ethnographic research now has become such a big term, especially after COVID, that many things have been inserted there. Digital ethnography, online, telephonic interviews. But those were the needs of the hour when the world was plagued by the whole idea of COVID. But ideologically speaking, righteously speaking, traditionally speaking, when we talk about ethnographic research, it is all about the researcher going to the people of the study, sitting in a face-to-face situation with them, observing them and their activities, talking to them, and trying to understand whatever he has kept as his objective. So this is where we begin with when we talk about ethnographic research. And what is the biggest quest of ethnographic research or ethnography? It's the human. Who people are, human variation, how do they differ, why do they differ, what are their customs, traditions, why is it that people of one community have a certain worldview, their own beliefs and patterns, their own ideas, their own ideologies, which is so different from the worldview or the way of life of another group, and how this worldview, these ideas, these beliefs actually shape the life of the people of a certain community. So all this comes under the purview of ethnographic research. So one thing becomes very clear is that when we talk about any area of study which has anything to do with human beings and how they go about with their lives, ethnographic research becomes a must. Now, when we talk about ethnography, and if you see the second bullet point, naturally it's a very important way of understanding people, their culture, and their way of life, which is an important ingredient of every kind of research dealing with people today. You know, contrary to ethnographic research, what kind of other research we normally do? Of course, we couple it up with ethnography. We go and consult libraries, we go and consult published reports, we go and consult secondary sources. That's all fine, absolutely fine. We bring it within ethnography, but at a later stage or in the beginning. But ethnography is hard for understanding people through observation, carrying out interviews with them, and in a face-to-face situation. So when we talk about this kind of a research, which is very qualitative and very important in knowing the other, and if we talk about its history, then without the name of ethnography, the nature of work has been going on from very, very ancient times. And here, when we explore certain writings of the Greek scholars, we realize that big names like Herodotus, somebody representing the 3rd century BC, they were also people who were actually going out trying to study humans elsewhere and how they live in their own cultural milieu. So, if you really talk about this practice of ethnographic research, then it is not something which is very recent or very current. It has been going on from very, very ancient times. And here we especially take the name of Herodotus, a Greek thinker, who traveled across the ancient world documenting political histories, traditions, and practices of people living in different parts as far as his access could go. We know those were the ages when mobility was not the way it is today. So, as far as the reach was, even people like Herodotus tried to understand within code the other cultures. So, as we go ahead and we try to see that what were the turning points or what were the episodes in global historical movement that show us that how ethnographic research has been going on without, of course, this formal term of ethnographic research. It was going on in practice. Here we took the name of certain ancient Greek thinkers like Herodotus, Plato, Aristotle, who have been talking about the basic quality of human being a gregarious animal, wanting to live with others. So that thought pattern was also going on. On the other hand, we have certain global dates of importance like geographical discoveries. Geographical discoveries, as we know, was that particular, this term is basically being used for that 14th century, 15th century global movement that saw people moving out of Europe to other parts of the world and discovering countries, discovering continents, discovering places. Now, how is this related to ethnographic research? It is related because when these geographical discoveries were being made, a very important revelation or understanding was growing in human beings that human being is not only about white skin, blonde hair, and that Caucasoid race. Human can be of any shape, size, and color. And this was being opened up before the people of the medieval times with the help of these geographical discoveries. And this was an important step in, again, understanding the other. When I say the other, I basically mean the people of other cultures, other areas, other ethnicities. Then, of course, we have episodes like Industrial Revolution, which again brought the world very close, where the human hand was replaced by the machines, and the mountains were cut down to build roads. Ships were moving on water, meaning mobility of the human had increased. And why is this again important in terms of ethnography? Because people of one place were moving out and exploring the people living in other areas through these means of communication, which were a blessing in a way of industrial revolution. So when you are the world today, it's a very obvious thing for us, that we click the internet button and we know the entire world is on our laptop. But centuries and centuries ago, when geographical conditions were tight, areas were landlocked, there was no mechanization or the use of machines, then for a very long time, there was a belief that human beings lack variety. But this idea of human variation, biological variation, and cultural variation, that was reinforced by episodes like geographical discoveries and industrial revolution, opening up cultures before the man, before the human, which were never thought to be existing. So the idea of studying the other has been there in human history. Early forms of ethnographic fieldwork were being conducted by anthropologists. Now comes the idea of, when I said that when we talk about ethnography, of course, we cannot take away the fact that it's a term which has been given a lot of huge contribution by the anthropologists. So when we talk about early forms of ethnographic research, it was being conducted by anthropologists, and here a particular name comes in. You know, today we are living in the age of new education policy 2020, which insists on multidisciplinarity, which insists on interdisciplinarity. So we do not attribute scholars to just disciplines. What I mean to say is we cannot say that we are talking about an anthropologist or a sociologist or a psychologist. So anyone who has nothing to do with these disciplines will have nothing to do with these scholars. That is a wrong conception. We may have nothing to do with a discipline, but the time has come where we do not restrict a scholar simply to the discipline. So if I take the name of Franz Boas here, who is known as the father of American anthropology, and many of you would say that since my discipline is not anthropology, so I should not have anything to do with Franz Boas, then I think we are going in the wrong direction. Because scholars are part of disciplines, but over and above those. So when we talk about Franz Boas, he was a person who is known as a father of American anthropology because he gave shape to American anthropology. He is one person who is really credited in giving shape to ethnographic research. He undertook a number of research expeditions around the turn of the 20th century. So we can see which era we are talking of. It was the beginning of 20th century, and he was carrying out several research expeditions, traveling to remote areas to survey unfamiliar lands and collect natural language texts. His main quest was to actually try to understand the human and human languages. And in this endeavor of his, he realized that there are many, many languages which are on the brink of extinction because their speakers are either becoming less or have taken up other languages, losing their own original tongue. So there has to be a point of motivation for every scholar, and this became a point of motivation for Franz Boas. He was the one person who realized that if we need to understand the correlation between language and culture, you cannot understand this without being a part of that culture. That means you have to go to the people of that culture, understand them, look at them, observe them, talk to them, understand their beliefs and practices, and then try to see how language is an important part of culture. So all these ideas were developing around the turning of the 20th century, and anthropologists were taking a lead in this direction because one thing which has been a cornerstone of the discipline of anthropology right from the beginning is its exclusive emphasis on field work. So here we have a person like Franz Boas who began this tradition, and with this tradition he gave another term to the world and not only to the field of anthropology, and that is cultural relativism. When people started understanding in the 19th and 20th century that culture is not just one type and people are of not just one kind, there is innumerable cultures, innumerable languages, each culture having their own religion, their own belief pattern. There rose this whole tendency, the human mind way of classifying into superior and inferior. The colonial times, who is superior? The white race looking down upon the black, the colonial era. Then when this kind of movement was going on, which kind of gave a reason for the world wars, simultaneously there was a wave of scholars coming up who were trying to prove that there is no question of superiority or inferiority of people or cultures. And Franz Boas was one of them who gave the idea of cultural relativism through his emphasis on ethnographic research, which says that you understand people by going to them, by carrying out fieldwork among them, living with them, and understanding why their culture is so different from the other. So they were parallelly trying to give a very important message to a world which was ridden by racist ideas that cultures are actually not superior or inferior. They are just different. And this whole idea of cultural relativism, which means that if you want to study a culture, understand a culture, then you need to understand it from the perspective of people who are experiencing it. Because they are the best people who can tell you about their own culture and how it is living in it. So this idea of cultural relativism again became a very important concept and ideology which was motivated by ethnographic research. And though when we are talking of Franz Boas, though he did not spend much time in these foreign places or live among his subjects, he encouraged his students to live among their subjects and learn their native languages. His students, I don't know whether you are familiar with these names, but very big names in American social sciences, Margaret Mead, Ruth Benedict, Abram Cardina, Linton, and all these people, they were actually taught by Franz Boas, and they became wonderful field workers. Because one thing which was being very, very clearly understood in the latter half of the 19th century, first part of 20th century, and henceforth, was that if you really want to understand people, you have to rise from your comfort zone. You no longer can become an armchair anthropologist or an armchair scholar. You have to pack your bags and go and do a study where people themselves are living. So the idea of field work became very, very crucial in the understanding of people and their culture. Now here we are taking another name, very important name when we talk about ethnographic research, and I keep associating the word fieldwork there because that is what ethnographic research is all about. Another name comes very, very important here, Malinowski. And Malinowski was basically a British scholar, a British anthropologist. He was born in Poland, but he was educated in Britain, London School of Economics, and he is why do we take his name in a big way when we talk about ethnographic methods and ethnography as such, because he was one person who carried out very, very important research in a place called the Trobriand Islands, that's in the Pacific. And his fieldwork was a very long-term fieldwork. 1914 to 1918, he was there. He was there right from the time when World War One broke out, and he was there uh, till the World War continued. And he has explained in great detail that how fieldwork needs to be done. 4 years he was there in the Pacific. And of course, there's history behind it that he had gone and he had not planned actually to conduct a very long-term field work. But that was the time when World War One broke out, and due to political reasons, he could not return. And he took permission that I need to carry out research among the Trobriand Islanders who are there in the Pacific Ocean near Australia side. He was given that permission, and he was there living with those people for 4 years. And this became a very important kind of a research for ethnographers of all fields later on. Forget about anthropology, sociology, when we talk about management, whether we talk about forestry, whether we talk about education today, anyone endeavoring to study a community or a people and tries to look up ethnographic research cannot miss out Malinowski. Because he was the one who conducted his research there, living with the people of his study. And he gave please come to the second bullet point. He is also credited with moving the discipline from armchair, summertime, and veranda anthropology. These three terms were there: armchair, summertime, and veranda, associated with anthropology before Malinowski and Franz Boas. Anthropologists were studying people. The basic idea of anthropology was to study human being in totality. When we study the physical side of human beings, we call it biological anthropology. When we study the culture of people, we call it cultural anthropology. So even before Malinowski had entered the scene, and that was the beginning of the 20th century, before that, anthropology was flourishing as a discipline. But in what way? As an armchair discipline, as a veranda anthropology. Armchair basically means anthropologists themselves were not going and doing field work. They were analyzing and giving laws of evolution on the basis of data which was collected by people who were not anthropologists. It was data collected by tourists, it was data collected by administrators, it was data collected by travelers, by businessmen, by Christian missionaries. All these people were collecting data which was being analyzed by anthropologists of the 19th century. Malinowski changed all this. He said, no, you need to be trained to collect data. Whether you are an anthropologist, sociologist, a person coming from the field of forestry or management or education or history, you undergo a course of methodology where you are told, you are taught, you are trained about how to collect information, collect data. It cannot be a personal diary of your jottings where you write down what you like and where you reject what you don't like. Research is scientific. And all these people who were collecting data before Malinowski had stepped in were people like Christian missionaries, British administrators, tourists. Now, if they are collecting data, they are not using the scientific methods of data collection. So if you're not using the right methods of data collection and going by your own whims and fancies of what you like and what you dislike, then such a data cannot be considered authentic. Then how can its analysis be considered authentic? So all this was going on in anthropology before Malinowski had stepped in. And this is known as armchair anthropology, where the anthropologist himself did not go to the field. Armchair is a symbolic representation of the fact that the anthropologist or the scholar is himself resting and sending others to go and collect. And those others are not trained people. And veranda anthropology is again, the meaning is the same. Veranda, you know what it is. Something adjoining the room. Room is the culture and the anthropologist kept roaming around it, did not enter the room. So this kind of anthropology saw a major movement when people like Malinowski moved in, who insisted and made it absolutely compulsory that you cannot do anthropology in a closed classroom. If you need to understand people, go to them, carry out ethnographic research. So here, Malinowski's very important contribution comes in. He makes research, very, very first-hand. That this first-hand information is crucial. And that is the reason why we owe a lot to Malinowski for giving shape to ethnography and ethnographic research. All right. Now, when we are talking of anthropology, so it should not look like a anthropology lecture, but as I said that when we talk about ethnography, we have to talk about the anthropological contribution. But this was also the time of the 1930s when critical sociologists of the Chicago School introduced a new stream of ethnographic studies when they started to explore their own street corners just as if they were unknown places. Now, as a matter of tradition, what was happening in anthropology was that the European people were studying the non-European societies and especially tribals, basically rural-based societies. That was happening in anthropology. 1930s was the time when in the field of sociology, what we call the Chicago School became very, very active with ethnographic studies. And they started studying their own street corners, meaning wherever they are, the urban centers, the urban localities. And in this respect, there's a very, very important work of William F. White, which I've just put on the slide. It's a 1943 publication, Street Corner Society, the Social Structure of an Italian Slum. So you see, anthropologists were focusing on the tribes and the rural side, in order to understand people and their culture and their way of living. What is their economy, what is their polity, what is their religion, how do they make a living, and all those things. Sociologists were also focusing in the 1930s on ethnographic research, but the emphasis was more on the towns and the urban centers. And this particular study by William Foote White is very, very important because it's an indication of the fact that how participant observation has to be done in order to study something like a slum culture. Now, here we see that although anthropologists ventured to remote lands to study the other, sociologists remained home and focused on the plights of the urban poor. So when we say about anthropology and sociology, usually they are known as sister disciplines because their objective is to study society, people, communities. But of course, we have different, ideologies. We have different methodologies to some extent. And here we say that when we talk about the beginnings of ethnographic research, we see that anthropologists were going in remote lands, remote areas, interiors, areas which were initially not accessible. Tribes living here and there in the jungles and the forests. This they tried to study within quotes, it's written the other. Why the other? Because when we look at the beginnings of ethnographic research, and when we look at the beginnings of anthropology, the trend was the white or the European studying the non-whites, coming towards Asia, going towards Africa. Sociologists, on the other hand, remain home, wherever they are. Sociologists, wherever they are, living in towns and cities, they tried to focus on the situation of the urban poor people. So the field was different to some extent in the beginning as far as these two disciplines are concerned. Today, of course, that line does not exist anymore. Anthropology has gone from tribal to rural to urban to corporate to gender and even to space anthropology. And likewise, sociology is no longer just refined to studying towns and cities. They have gone and conducted fantastic research on the tribal communities in the rural areas, in the interior. So today the scenario is very different. But yes, that's how the beginning was at that point of time. And when we talk about ethnography, ethnographic research, which includes all the ethnographic methods, this area of qualitative research did not remain confined to anthropology or sociology. It has been shaped by a number of disciplines. I keep on saying that anybody, even we talk of historians doing ethnographic research. We talk of social geographers doing ethnographic research. We talk of people from the medical field. When we talk of public health, doing ethnographic research. So this method of qualitative inquiry is not discipline bound. Currently, the field sites of ethnographic research can be anywhere. When I say anywhere, it means it can be the other cultures, even today. Other cultures mean culture which is other than that of the scholar. You may be from India, but you would like to study a community in Indonesia. You may be living in North India, but you would like to cover a tribe living in South India. You may be a teacher, but want to cover how the dominoes are working. What is the domino culture? How is the KFC management going on? So you need not be part of that culture. So when we study cultures other than our own, we are talking more broadly in terms of other cultures. And in fact, Other Cultures is a book written by John Beatty, very, very good book, published long time back. So that's how we see that the field can be anywhere. It could be other cultures, or it could be my own culture, one's own culture. If I am a person from the Naga tribe and I study my own Naga community, the Sumi Naga, fair enough. If I am a Khasi I study my own Khasi culture, fair enough. But when we study our own culture, then the broad label becomes auto-ethnography. We call it auto-ethnography. So that's how the trend has been, that when we talk of ethnographic research, it started actually as a study of other cultures. But with the passage of time, it branched out and brought practically every area of human living as its field. And the whole idea of other did not always remain there. People started even studying their own culture. And that came to be known as auto-anthropology or auto-ethnography. Now, when we talk about ethnographic research and we say that the field can be anywhere, let's see what examples are there. Ethnographic research can take place anywhere: urban communities, fan clubs, trade fairs, shopping centers, and even social media. Even social media. One of my scholars in my department has just submitted his thesis on Facebook, how Facebook has influenced and changed and influenced, mobilized the life of people. So ethnographic research, as you see, has become a very, very wide-ranging umbrella, bringing, as I say, every form of urban living, every form of human living within its purview. Today we talk of social media. That area itself has not remained untouched through ethnographic research. Now, the main aim of the ethnographers is to observe and analyze how people interact with each other and with their environment in order to understand their culture. So what do ethnographers actually do? They, wherever their field is, they go and observe and analyze how people interact with each other, with their environment, in order to understand their entire way of life, their entire gamut. You know. So this is the main objective of ethnographers. Now, if this is the objective, of course, people who are coming from different fields, anybody doing corporate study will have his own set of objectives. Anybody coming from the field of forest management will have their own objective. But keeping those objectives in mind, we do ethnographic research. And there we use ethnographic methods. I'm just going as a one-way traffic. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, okay. If there is anything you all wish to ask, you can ask me right now in whatever we have discussed. Although I'm going to bring in some time towards the end of the session for discussion, but if there is anything which you all wish to come up with now, you can certainly ask, because this is not a typical lecture. I prefer to take it as a discussion.
Yes, ma'am. I have a query. Like,
Yes.
you are talking about auto-ethnographic research. Is it any connection with narrative research?
Narrative research is part of, let's say, ethnographic research. It's not only auto-ethnography, any form of ethnography. Ethnography basically means that we are conducting research by going to a field. And there, when we talk to people, we, keeping our objectives in mind, which can be different from different scholars, we also take down narratives. Narratives are basically anything being narrated by the informants on the field. So whether you call it a narrative research or you simply call it a narrative, it is a kind of a rendition about how a respondent on the field is trying to tell the researcher about an entire episode of his personal life. Basically, narratives are very personal in nature. So if you say narrative research, I would say it becomes part of ethnography, whether it is ethnography or auto-ethnography. Right? Anything? Or should I continue? I'm not minimizing my screen, so I cannot see you. But whoever asked this question, do you have any other question in mind? You can ask. Otherwise, I push on.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Okay, all right. So here, when we talk about anyone else, or we'll take it up, okay, towards the end. So here, when we are talking about how to conduct ethnographic research, there are some methods. It's a research, so obviously there will be methods. Now, ethnographic research often starts with choosing a field site. You have to choose a field. I have done so much of talking on ethnographic research, but let me break up this word ethnography. If we break up this word ethnography, it becomes broken into two terms, ethnos and graphy. Ethnos basically means any group. It means any ethnic group, any race, any group of people. Graphy basically means written description. So that's why in the beginning I said ethnography is both the process and the end result. The process is field work. We do field work. We go to the people of our study. We live with them. We carry out interview. We observe them face to face. That is doing field work or doing ethnographic research. That is ethnography as a process. And once we have collected all the data and we write reports, publish documents, that is the written part, graphy. So ethnographic research often starts with choosing the field. That can be a village, that can be any urban area, urban locality. There can be a shopping center, any organization, a club, an association, anything can be your field, whichever you wish to study. That is why today we talk of corporates coming in the field of ethnography. We study corporate culture. We study public health. We study how hospitals run. Then hospital becomes the field. When I want to see how a private company is working, say for example, Pepsi, then that company or that area becomes my field. So the first thing about ethnographic research is we have to choose a field. And field can be anything, whatever has been written on the slide here. Once a potential field site has been selected, once you select that this is what I want to do, now you all are coming, you all are participants from different fields. The common thing is that you are dealing with people. So if any one of you wishes to study, say, something to do with the forest, I was part of a project with the Government of India, Ministry of Forest and Environment, where they had engaged me to study Sariska and Ranthambore, tiger zots. The reason was that the government had decided to take some of the land where the tigers were living. They wanted to take some of the land where villagers were living, evacuate those villages so that the tiger can have more space to live in. Because tiger, is a endangered species. So it was the plan of the Ministry of Forest and Environment to create more space for the tiger for his habitation. And in this, the human villages were being compromised. Obviously, you cannot make the man and the tiger live together. So people have to move away. So this was an entire project that was going on sometime in 2012, 13, 14, and I was part of it. So we did ethnographic research in these, Sariska and Ranthambore tiger areas. So field can be anything depending upon your project, your area of study. What are you wanting to study? So once you have selected your field, then you need to negotiate access. Because field work has to be done for a long time. And if you have to do field work with the people of your study for a long time, then you have to make the beginning very correct. Go by what is known as ethical norms. And these ethical norms bring in the idea of negotiating access, taking permission from the people on the site to visit the site for research purposes during a certain period of time. That's very, very crucial. Because that field that are selected are areas where the researcher is going to work, going to live, going to study, meet people for a long period of time in order to see the unseen. Seeing the unseen is a very important part of ethnographic research. You see whatever is in front of you. But if you really want to go deeper in the understanding of people and their culture and their way of life, then you have to explore what you apparently cannot see. That means you have to go into the details. You have to go in depth, spend a longer period of time, take people into confidence so that they are able to tell you which they would normally not tell any stranger. So field work is not a very easy exercise. It is challenging. And if the beginnings go wrong, then of course a lot more problem comes in later on. So in the beginning you need to really go very correctly, and in that we take into consideration a proper way of behavior. Meaning anybody who is a scholar here. So negotiating access is very important. You need to take permission from the people. You just can't go to them and expect them to spend their time with you. There has to be a certain protocol, and there the negotiation of access comes in. Then, of course, getting permission. I want to go and study a certain village in some remote area of India, or I want to study the office culture of a corporate business house, or I want to study how the orthopedics department at All India Institute of Medical Sciences in Delhi is working, whatever the field is. You need to follow the right procedure of getting permission, and you need to convince the gatekeeper. Now gatekeepers are normally, it's a very nice term which we use in ethnographic research. For any field, there are some people who need to be taken into confidence and with whom you need to build trust so that they can be instrumental in giving you access and also negotiating your access with others in the field. These gatekeepers can be anyone, the village headman or the CEO of the company. When we, in our subject, our students go for field work, we normally give them letters of recommendation that, okay, they are coming from NEHU, from the Department of Anthropology, they are taking their students' I-card and the letter saying that they are pursuing the PhD program on this particular topic. And when that student goes to that field, he is unknown to the culture is unknown to him. He obviously approaches the village headman. That's the basic manners and the right protocol. These are the gatekeepers. They need to know what you are here for, why. Because it's human nature. Why should people talk to a stranger for so long a period of time, for 1 or 2 years? They will not, unless and until that element of trust and faith has been built up. So ethnographic research, number one, is not short term. It is a long-term research. It's an in-depth research. It's an intensive research. So here, when you make the beginnings, we need to follow certain basic commonsensical norms. Convince the gatekeeper, whether it is the village man or the CEO of the company, about the relevance of your study. You have to, the researcher has to be very forthright in explaining the people of his field why he is going to be there if he expects cooperation from them. What else the scholar does? The field is selected, the permission is granted, he starts doing field work. And in this process, he selects key informants, people who you think are central in terms of objectives of research. Now, there are so many. Suppose it's a village. You are doing a research in a village. You want to study the political system there, or you want to see how the Manrega is working there. What is the government doing? What are the government developmental plans which are meant for the development of that village, which includes sanitation, which includes education? Suppose your topic is something like this. You want to study something like this. Now, in order to study a topic like this, developmental project, developmental plans and policies of the government at the village level, you need to, as a researcher, when you're doing your field work, need to identify key informants. Key informants are people who the researcher feels can be very, very important because of their knowledge, because of their experience. To speak, language is a very big supporter of ethnographic research and a very big barrier also. Because in the field, people will be talking to you in a language which is not yours, and your language will not be theirs. So a common link language needs to be there, and whoever is fluent in that, or at least communicative in that, can be a good key informant. So identification of key informants out of all the informants on the field is again a very important ethnographic step of research. And before that, as I forgot to mention one term when I was saying that you need to access yourself into the field, take permission, it all comes under a word called rapport establishment. You establish rapport, where you tell the people of your study when you have entered the field, you are introducing yourself, you introduce yourself in the most correct way, that you are here for what, so that they are not in any doubt about the researcher. Because there are many fields, whether it's a hospital setup, it's a business setup, it's a, any kind of a setup. A stranger coming in and saying I want to study you is not enough. You have to be very strong in convincing the people, and in this process of convincing the people, your being honest and to the point is very important. If you are doing a PhD research leading to your PhD degree, say that. If it's a dissertation, say that. If it's something, any study, it's all about using the right words and establishing good rapport. Rapport simply means that when the respondents or the people on the field whom you are studying are aware of the reason why you are there, and they accept you with that. If this is done, then it means you have succeeded in establishing rapport. So, and then you start looking for key informants. There may be 1,000, 2,000 people on the field, 10,000 people on the field, but not everybody may be an important informant. So when you are talking to people, that's why fieldwork is a long-term process, because when you are talking to people, you are interacting with them, you are also learning who can be a potential key informant for you, who can give you more information, lead you to the others from whom you need to have information. It can be the village headman. It can be anybody who is more literate in that area. It can be anyone who is more influential in the area. Key informant can be anyone. But the researcher needs to identify. And another thing here is, when you are entering the field, you are going to do field work, you are going to carry out ethnographic research, that's one thing. But this is the beginning. You need to take informed consent. That's where rapport was coming in, actually. That you tell the people why you are there, how long you plan to be there, what are you expecting from them. Because if they are not satisfied with this, then your research can go into doldrums. Because your research is qualitative in nature. So people will have to take interest in you. And how to make them take interest in your research is where your expertise as a researcher has to come in. And in that process, this idea of informed consent is very important. If you are not given consent by a person, you cannot go after him, and that's perfectly fine. There are many informed consent forms which are filled up by the respondent in the beginning of research. They give it in writing that, yes, I am willing to cooperate with you. So those are the regular checks and the regular protocol which a researcher needs to follow on the field while entering the field. Now, when we talk about, we have said that what is ethnography, ethnographic methods. Methods, obviously, they come in that how I have my field, I have my topic, I have my area of research. This is what I want to collect data on. Then how do I go about it? And I'm going to deal with people in their natural setting. Then what methods should an ethnographer use? Ethnographic field work typically begins with participant observation, which is later complemented by other data. Now, let us talk about, first of all, one method here, observation. Forget about participant right now. Just think of observation. When we go to our field, and I say field can be anything, any place, a locality, a village, any place. Obviously, Our eyes are all the time working. So observation is a very, very important method of understanding whatever we are wanting to understand. You know, and observation is basically of two types: participant observation and non-participant observation. Participant observation simply means when the researcher, when the ethnographer participates in the life of the people. If I am wanting to study how agricultural activities are going on, which is the crop which is being sown right now, when will the time come for the harvest, I go to the people of my field, that can be a village. I want to talk to them about these activities, but they don't have time to come and sit with me. They are working on the field. Then, when I go and join them in their work, when you participate in the life of the people, and in that process, you are observing them and talking with them, that is participant observation. Non-participant observation is also very fine. You are observing them from a distance. You are not really doing what they are doing. So when a researcher is on the field, many a time it is non-participant observation which is going on. Obviously, if I am in a hospital setup, if I'm wanting to study the cardiology area, I'm not a doctor. Why will I even try to participate like a doctor? No question. So there my observation will be strictly non-participant observation, because that is an area of expertise. But if I'm going and I'm wanting to cover a marriage ritual and people are dancing and singing, and I want to cover that aspect of how they conduct their traditional marriages and go about negotiating between the kinsmen, then I can also join in their dance. That is not really an area of expertise, as the way the medical sciences are. So it's a very flexible method where a participant observer becomes a non-participant one, and where the non-participant becomes a participant one. There is not a rigid line there. Important thing is observation. That observation is we observe a lot on the field. And this method is coupled with other methods as well. Interviews. We actually talk to the people of our study. And when we talk, we are not, of course, for us it is interview, for them it can be conversation. Like these terms which are in our mind, participant observation, non-participant observation, structured interview, that is for us as researchers. Our informants have nothing to do with this terminology. For them, an interview is just a conversation. So interviews are also, this is another very important ethnographic method. Structured interview, non-structured. Structured simply means where there is a pre-decided list of questions. Questions have already been decided by the ethnographer, and the same questions are asked to everyone on the field, whatever is my sample size. And usually these questions are poll type, meaning with yes or no, some objectives given, you tick the right one or you tell the right one, poll type. Those are the types in the form of options. What do you have to say? Does it happen? Does it not happen? Yes or no? That kind. So that kind of interview is very structured, where the list of questions is pre-decided, same questions being asked to everyone, and usually those questions having options, which the informant has to say that, okay, this I choose, this I don't choose. Do you get up in the morning? Yes or no? That's it. Non-structured interviews are more flexible. They are far more flexible, where most of the questions emerge during the matter of conversation. Questions may not be pre-decided, and keeping in mind different types of informants, the questions may change. They are more in the pattern of conversation. You don't restrict the respondent or the informant to choose between 3 or 4 options. You give him or her the open field to say whatever they want to say. So when interviews of that kind are carried out, they are non-structured interviews. So usually in actual practice, when we are doing ethnographic research, and when students or participants or anyone comes back with their research and we say, what kind of interviews did you conduct? They said, ma'am, we conducted both structured and non-structured. This is absolutely fine. Because usually the questions can be answered with yes and no, and usually they are, in order to get more into the details or go in depth, a non-structured interviews are also asked. There is one term that also comes in semi-structured. That means we are asking both open-ended questions and closed-ended questions. Open-ended meaning we are not restricting the response of the informant to given options. But there are some questions where we say, okay, you pick up either of the four. Which newspaper do you read? One option, Times of India. Second option, Pioneer. Third option, Statesman. Fourth option, any other. There they will say, okay, I read any other, some other. So depending upon what kind of research we are doing, we can keep on changing our questions. And naturally, the interview types will also change, bringing in both structured, non-structured elements there. So when we are doing ethnographic research, we are doing this on the field, we are doing a lot of observation, because observation will tell you many things which people will not like to speak about. There are some, like in criminology, when anybody is doing ethnographic research on prisoners, on rapists, these are very, very tough areas to make the informant speak. It's not like what soap you're using to take bath. It's a serious thing. So in such areas, when we carry out ethnographic research, those who have done it have made very, very good use of observation and interview at the same time. When you read about their ethnographic researches, you realize that they are talking about the fact that while conducting interview, they are looking at their respondents who are telling them something, but their body language is conveying something else. And since this is qualitative research, and depending upon the seriousness of your topic, you need to know the actual thing. So usually observation, interview, when they go together, they throw a lot of light on the body language of the respondent. A researcher is able to know whether the respondent is telling the truth or not, whether the respondent is being evasive about something, trying to ignore a question. And if he's trying to ignore a question, then why? So that's why we say no, that these are the things which need to be explored. And that is what ethnographic research becomes a very qualitative research. You cannot quantify and clearly, spell out human emotions and human reactions. So, as I said, that interviews we were talking of, that interviews will be carried through questions which can be both open-ended and closed-ended. Interviews can be both formal and informal, depending upon who is sitting in front of us. Obviously, if a teacher taking an interview with the vice chancellor of the university, we know it will be a very formal type of an interview. Informal interview has a more relaxed attitude. So depending upon the respondent, depending upon the topic, depending upon the objective of the research, interviews can be changed from one type to the other as the need of the hour. An ethnographic study can be centrally based on open-ended narrative. Somebody was asking me about narrative sometime back. So here we come to that. An ethnographic study can be centrally based on open-ended narrative or life history interviews, which can also be called ethnographic interviews. What happens when we are there on the field and we are talking to people, we are wanting to know something? Open-ended narrative means I am asking him, okay, so in this village there is a problem, epidemic has spread, some kind of a disease has spread. Now, why is it this village which is always most vulnerable to that epidemic? Now, I'm asking somebody and that person starts telling me, no, when we settled here long time back, then this happened, there was a curse, there was a belief. That person telling me everything in a narrative style becomes open-ended narrative. Narrative coming from the word narration. So many a time when we want to go into the details of anything on the field, then we allow our informant to have the liberty to speak and speak as much as they want. Usually in this exercise, we will also realize they are moving away from the point. And that is where the art of the ethnographer has to come in, that without being rude, you try to bring your respondent back to the topic of inquiry. Because human nature is such, they love to talk. So in this whole process, a methodology, a method got evolved, that is the narrative method, open-ended narrative, life history interviews. People will tell you entire life history. Okay, this happened, then this happened, then this happened, and those are not vague talks. They are very, very important. That's why one of the methods that we use in ethnographic research is also case history or life history. In order to understand why something has happened at present, in order to understand it in totality and in completeness, we need to know its history. So life history approach, case history approach, narrative approach is important to understand the context behind the current occurrences. Why something is happening the way it is. The background needs to be properly explored. And all this comes under the purview of ethnographic interviews. And if you say ethnographic interviews, then immediately something comes to the mind, job interview. No, job interview is different. You enter a board, there are 6-7 members, they will talk to you about your qualification. That's also an interview, but of a different flavor. Here we are on the field, in natural setting, people sitting on their charpoys, polishing their rooms, whatever they are doing, and you're talking to them. Ethnographic interview. An important part of the interviews is to establish a rapport with the participant. The best way to do so is by being a good listener, which means to listen and hear much more than to talk and converse. Now, this is again very important, that when we are doing long-term research on the field, we have gone to the people of our study. We have gone to the field. They have not come to us. And we are wanting to know about them. The most important thing becomes we need to have the habit of being a good listener. Because it is, and it's a very common sense thing, that people love to tell about themselves. They love to talk. So if your informants are willing to do that, then the researcher has to be a good listener. And this is very important because many a time what happens is, why this point is very important, because a researcher is going with limited time and money at his or her disposal. He wants to complete his project, he wants to complete his objective of research, report back to his organization. He has limitation of time, he has limitation of resources. And when he's there on the field and talking to someone who is wanting to tell at length, usually the researchers become very impatient. Either they become rude, or even if they don't become rude, their body language starts conveying the disinterest in the narrative. They may be absolutely right in their own way. Practically speaking, they don't have so much of time to listen to things which have nothing to do with their research. But we have to remind ourselves this is ethnographic research and not laboratory research. Our subjects are not guinea pigs. They are living human beings. So if they are digressing from a point, talking a lot, the researcher needs to exercise a lot of patience and with great politeness and tact and diplomacy, without being offending, bring the respondent back to the topic of research. And many a time this also happens, that long narratives are so qualitatively rich that they really add a lot of value to the data of the researcher, which the researcher had never even thought of. So narratives need to be understood with a pinch of salt here and there. What to take, what to leave. But in this process, you cannot offend your respondent. So that's why it's very important to be a good listener. While we are doing interviews, now somebody is talking to us, I'm asking a question, they are telling me something, then I'm asking another question, they are telling me something. Usually what happens is that today ethnographic research is both on literate and illiterate societies. Initially, it was all about studying the less developed societies where people were not so educated. But now As I said, every organization, every department, every endeavor of social living and working is part of ethnographic research, meaning it is the field. And when interviews are going on, then how do you take everything that is being told to you? How do you do that? Now, there are different ways. Traditionally speaking, in ethnographic research, when it was carried out in less educated societies where literacy was less, rural areas, interiors, remote areas, people used to say something. Even today, this is done. So, the ethnographer or the researcher should make use of jottings. Jotting simply means that you have a small diary or a copy and you jot down the main words which the respondent is saying. You cannot write the whole sentence. It's humanly impossible. Neither can you restrict or hinder the flow of the interview by telling the respondent, look, I want to write. You just pause a little. He will not. For him, it's a conversation. He has flown into it. Now you cannot hamper it. But you don't want to miss out on the information that he or she is telling you. Then what is the best way to do it? Traditionally speaking, we make use of jottings. Jottings meaning noting down the keywords instead of writing the whole sentence. Another thing is interviews can be taped with the participants' consent. Here again, the word consent becomes very important. Because anything that is being recorded puts the respondent in a alarmed situation. Even when we were conducting classes during the COVID scenario, because of certain things happening, the teachers also were little bit on alarm, knowing that their online lecture may go viral here and there. And God forbid, if you have spoken a word here and there, then it's on record. So anything that is going on record, whether it is a tape recorded version, whether it is a video film, if you are doing this with your respondents, informants, participants on the field, then you need to take consent for that. Because we are in a digital world and with a click of a button, anything can go globally viral. And there's nothing wrong with that. But a lot of things are added to something very innocent also. And I'm talking about politicization these days. So people have become a little bit wary that, okay, I'm saying something, but don't put this on record. So if you are wanting to tape interviews, you need to take the consent of the person. Even if you are good at keeping notes, it is helpful to have an actual account of what was said and how. Taping allows you to transcribe interview data for closer analysis. When you tape the interviews, you can keep on playing it many times so that you are able to understand the lines which are not even said, that it is called unwritten aspects. So taping allows you to keep on understanding what is being said from a very closer angle. You can keep on hearing it and trying to understand what the respondent is wanting to tell. In straight questions, there will be straight answers. But many a time this also happens. Topics like domestic violence, topics like molestation, topics like organizational red tapeism, corruption. People will not talk openly. You need to understand what they are trying to say. So taping helps you to keep on listening to the dialogues which are being said, so you're able to understand better. But taping comes with its own risks, right? But this is one way we can do interview, but participants' consent, written consent, that I am taping. Do you allow me to tape? If you don't, then you can simply, um, jot down, just write the keywords. Because at the end of the day, your exercise of carrying interview should not make the respondent, informant, participant uncomfortable. That's very, very important. If the participant does not want you to tape the interview, take enough time after the interview to write down more complete notes about what was said. So if they say, no, please don't record, neither video recording nor audio recording, you listen to what I'm saying. So you make some jottings. But you know that fieldwork is a long-term process. Every day you are coming back to the field. So if you will not take time out the same day, in order to give a detailed version of whatever you have jotted down at the time of interview, then you will forget the nuances, the finer points. You will not remember at the time when you are doing an analysis of your data. So whatever, if you are not taping the interview and you are simply making a jotting of the whatever the participant is telling you, then it is important that the same day you make a detailed notes of whatever has been told to you, so that later when you are analyzing your data, you are not missing out on very fine but very important points. So this is how we actually cover the whole process of taking interviews. Another method which we use in ethnographic research is questionnaires. Now, questionnaires are basically list of questions which the participant has to fill up himself. Now, there's a difference between interview and questionnaire. In interview, the researcher, suppose I am doing ethnographic research, I will have a list of questions before me. I will ask those questions to my respondent. Respondent will say something to me and I will write down his response. And usually interviews are done or are a very important method of data collection in societies where there is no or little literacy, where people don't know how to read and write. They can tell you their answer orally, but they cannot write it for you. So their interview schedules are used, list of questions, and the respondent and the researcher himself or herself writes down the responses of the people. But questionnaires are different. Questionnaires are also list of questions. After every question, there is some gap given. Again, there is a question, another gap. This is given to the respondent. And the respondent or the informant on the field fills it up himself. That means he has the ability to read and write. That's why he can write. So questionnaires are administered on population who are literate, who are educated, are able to give their responses in writing themselves. Interviews are conducted even in communities, crucially in communities. There is no other way of getting information there. People who are not able to read or write. They can tell you, but you have to write down their responses. So questionnaires are very easy to administer. Sometimes they are given, sometimes they are posted, sent through mail. You can send several questions. You have come back to your own workplace. You are working as a teacher in a university and college, but you can send your questionnaires to the people of your study. Tell them to please mail it back to you after they have filled it up. So that's another method of data collection. Then there is something called field notes. Field notes, obviously very simple to understand, notes that are related to field work. The general advice is that the field notes should be written either during the stay in the field or as soon as possible after leaving the field site. Now you have gone to do field work. You are trying to study a people, a community, a culture through field work, observing them, talking to them, taking their case studies, narratives, right? Now, you are doing that during daytime. It is said that your field notes, the detailed notes of all this data that you are collecting from the field, it should be written during the stay in the field or as soon as possible after leaving the field site. The timing is very important here. Because here the human memory is into question. Field work, ethnographic research, as I keep repeating, is not a short-term process. It's not about a week or a month. When we say ethnographic research, it may take several months. Ordinarily speaking, in anthropology, we say not at stretch, but keeping all the phases together, it should be that long. Now, if fieldwork is supposed to be a long research, then it is said that the pen is always mightier. The faintest of handwriting is better than the brightest of memory. And that is where the role of the field notes comes in. Usually researchers are short in time. They say, okay, this I remember fine. But when by the time your research gets over, there is so much that you may miss out, you may forget very, very important things. So writing down detailed field notes of the data collected on the field during field work, or as soon as the field work gets over, these detailed notes, which can take a form of a thesis, a whole bulky document, whatever, it's very important not to cut corners, not to go for shortcuts. You have to give a detailed written description of your entire experience of the field. That is empirical data. So field notes are very important because they help in wonderful analysis after the field work is over and you are analyzing your data and giving it an ethnographic writing shape. Even though you may not think so when observing, you are most likely to forget relevant details unless writing them down immediately. That's why I said, no, timing is very important. It is always given as when we were doing our research and our supervisors used to make it very important, and sometimes we found it very irritating also. But then looking back, we realized that they were very right when they said that don't delay in the time between data collection and writing about it. Because if there is a delay, then many things will be forgotten, which could be very crucial for your research. Another aspect about ethnographic research is maintenance of a field diary. You know, I'm going to the field, I'm talking to people, I'm observing, I'm taking down cases, I'm noting down narratives. All that is fine. But there is something called the field worker's diary, which is very personal. Field worker diary, because this became a very important part of ethnographic research. You know, any method of qualitative research undergoes many phases. How we started with ethnographic research from Franz Boas and Malinowski's time, almost 150 years ago, is very different from the ethnographic research that is now. It has taken so many colors and so many dimensions, and one dimension was it was being realized some decades back that the person who is doing the research is also a human being. He's not a robot, he's a human being. And field work will not always be a very welcome or a, rosy exercise. It's not mechanical at all. There is heart, there is emotion, there is life involved. Whose life? The researcher's life. And field diary is a reflection of the personal. And it is not something like a choice. When we send our students, we tell them, you please maintain a field diary. Field diary is where you note down or jot down your everyday field experience. At the outset, on the field, you may find something easy, you may find something tough, you may find somebody very welcoming, you may find somebody very insulting. You are a human, you may like, you may dislike, you may get hurt. In your field diary, when you note down these things, apparently they don't become part of your analysis, but in the longer exercise of understanding people without a very selfish agenda, field diary comes as a very, very important document. Malinowski, I keep taking his name. He conducted his field work from 1914 to 1918 in Trobriand Islands among a people who were highly, highly vulnerable, because I don't want to use the word primitive. It is no longer allowed in anthropology. We cannot call anybody primitive, but highly vulnerable, not exposed to the world. And here was a man suited, booted, who was living among them and trying to understand them, become friendly with them. But just as in our family, we tend to get put off by many things. He used to be put off by many things among the Trobriand Islanders. And his frustration, his anger, his sadness got reflected in his field diary, which was revealed to the world years. 1967, Malinowski's diary came forth. And this diary was personal, but it gave to the world of ethnography a very important message: reflexivity. It was not only Malinowski's diary, it was many researches which were going on at the time of the 16s and 17s in ethnographic research, which gave importance to what we say as reflexivity. That the researcher himself is a human being, needs to reflect upon himself. Where is he going wrong? Is he becoming biased? because of his personal likes and dislikes. There is a continuous tussle which keeps on going between subjectivity and objectivity in data collection on the field, simply because the researcher himself is a human being given to emotions, given to likes and dislikes, and being a part of certain culture. So that cannot be ignored when we are collecting data and when we are analyzing it. So the role of the field diary has a very long run, indirect, but very important influence in understanding ethnographic research. It is a reflection is about what you have thought. Field diary deals with what? It deals with your own thoughts. Reflection is about what you have thought, felt, and learned when making observations. What was it like to conduct your research? Did you feel comfortable being at the site? Did you have any negative emotions during your field work? In what ways did you connect with the participants, and in what ways did you not? It's a very honest kind of a diary, and that's important because field work, ethnographic research is a long-term process. You cannot remain artificial there. And as you are doing field work, you are meeting strangers, you are talking to them. Experiences can be both good and bad. But when you reflect on those for the next day to come, because you know you have come with an objective and that objective is research, then somewhere you have to look within to become a better self tomorrow. So it's a very cathartic area actually, ethnographic research. It's not only limited to a topic and a research or a PhD degree or a project. You evolve as a person. And that is where the importance of reflexivity comes in. If you all want, you can do a Google search on reflexivity later on. Reflection is highly relevant in ethnographic research, but be careful to separate it from description and analysis. Because description and analysis has to be scientific. You cannot bring in your emotions there. Now, you have done ethnographic research, you have carried out field work, lived with the people of your study, carried out long-term field work, did your interviews, observed them, noted the things down about their culture. All this is empirical data collected from the field. And now you have to analyze it, interpret it, in order to give it a shape which is known as research findings. In ethnographic research, while doing field work and collecting empirical data, analysis takes place through the fieldwork or research and is closely connected with interpretation. Data doesn't speak for itself. Data has to be analyzed. Data has to be interpreted. Analysis. When we are analyzing the data that we have collected from our field, then we should ask these questions to get more clarity as to how to analyze it. What do my field data tell me? What have I learned in the field? What interesting and unique things can I say in order to answer my research questions? So it's like you are now giving a meaning to the data or the information that you have collected from the field. So analysis becomes an important part. And for analysis, the following points are useful to keep in mind. Usually why I'm sharing this with you, because in my own department, students come back from field, they have done field work for a long period of time. There's data, but many a time analysis is missing. Analysis is very important. I mean, what are you trying to tell? Have your research questions or research objectives been answered or not? That is something which the researcher needs to ask, an ethnographer needs to ask himself. So how, the following points that we need to keep in mind while doing analysis of our data is, start with reading through your field notes and other data. Many a time you go through your data. You have collected it, no one else. But when you go through it, go through your field notes many times, 2, 3 readings, 4, 5 readings, you will realize that you are able to connect it to something which you have already been reading. I'm sure you must have had some lectures in this course on review of literature. So it's important part of research. Ethnographic research everything is dependent on the other. Even ethnographic research is dependent upon the literature that is already in the market, secondary sources. So first thing that we need to do is, when we need to collect our field data and go through it many times, several times. Why? Becoming familiar with the empirical data. Empirical data is the data that you are collecting from the field. Becoming familiar with the empirical data helps you to understand that data well. After some rounds of reading, start to make notes on the text you are reading and pay attention to traces of patterns, connections, similarities, or contrastive points. Meaning, whatever you had done in review of literature, meaning similar related researches which have already been published, the secondary sources. As a researcher, as an ethnographer, you will be expected to have a sound knowledge of those. And when you are analyzing your own field data and reading it many times, it is normal for you to connect it to the secondary sources which you have already gone through or you are parallelly reading. And this is analysis, where we are able to bring in our first-hand empirical data from the field in correlation with the data which has already been published, the books and articles which have already been written. Whether the theories which I am taking, the concepts which I have used, have correlation with the concepts and theories used by other scholars doing a similar kind of a study. So it is an analysis of the empirical data or the field data becomes very, very good when we go through it and try to correlate it with similar readings, similar published works. There are several now softwares available for qualitative researches like ethnography. These softwares are NVivo or Ethnograph. Normally, we analyze qualitative data that we have collected from the field without using softwares. But now, these days, these softwares have also become important. If anybody wants to use them, they need to have a good knowledge of the computers, first of all, and have a good training in understanding these and using these softwares. These softwares are basically meant for qualitative analysis of data, right? But it's not necessary. It's not necessary. You are not handicapped if you neither know NVivo or if you neither know Ethnograph. You need not be a software expert in order to analyze your ethnographic data. It's not a compulsion at all. It's an option. If you can use it, you use it. Writing about ethnographic research, the word ethnography literally means a portrait of people. If I'm trying to understand the hospital management, the company structure, how people in a factory work, how people in a government department working, we carry out field work there, we carry out ethnographic research there, collect data, analyze it, give it a meaning, interpret it. It's called portrait of a people. This is how we know. That's how we say corporate culture is like this. Hospital management is like this. So ethnography is about representing the field. But there is a catch here. The catch is it's a representation of where you have done your work, not the whole globe. If you have picked up a Sumi Naga village for your study, and you are doing an ethnographic research there, a field work based research there, and you say Sumi Naga people are like this, that may go wrong because you have not studied all of the Sumi villages. It will stand good to represent that particular field. It's very important to understand representation does not mean generalization. You represent the field which you have studied. But if you try to represent on the basis of your field work, the entire community, which you are also not aware of, theirs can be wrong. So be careful. Representation does not mean generalization. It doesn't mean giving sweeping statements for the whole community. That's not academic. Ethnographic writing is best described as evocative, descriptive, and lively. It is academic writing, but it also requires creativity in rendering scenes, sights, smells, feelings, experiences, and people as lifelike as possible. help the reader to be in the field just as you were and to feel and understand what it was like. Why am I saying this? Your topic is ethnographic methods. This is what we were planning to discuss today. We were planning to discuss what is ethnography. Ethnography is not only field work done, but what will become public is what you have written, how you write field work, how you write about the data that you have collected from the field. While you were collecting data from the field, that was also ethnographic research. That was field work going on. That's why that was ethnographic research in process. And ethnographic research as an end result will mean that that data has been documented, either in the form of an article, either in the form of a report, either in the form of a documentary, either in the form of a book. And whether it is the article, it is the book, that is what goes in public view. And that is a biggest crucial importance of ethnographic research, that the reader should be able to know writing how the people are, those people whom you had studied. They should get the correct picture. And this became very important after 1985, 86, when a very important book, Writing Cultures, was published. It was a postmodernist take on ethnographic research. It was a postmodernist take on anthropology as such. That field work is all very fine, but field work a researcher is doing with the people of his study. The world doesn't know about it. The world gets to know about it only with the published form. That means data, how it is being written. There the ethnographer has to become very, very careful. And one of the scholars have given this example, and I'm just wanting to give this example before I end my class, that if I'm doing a study of any area, any village, anywhere in Africa, whatever, that person said that I meaning the researcher, I saw the people of San Francisco eating their ice cream with sauce. It was written. That means he has represented that all the people of San Francisco take their ice cream with sauce. The reality was that when he was roaming about, he saw one person eating his ice cream with sauce. So such a wrong representation was happening in the field of ethnographic research, and the world rose to it after this book, Writing Cultures, got published in 1984, 85, 86, which gave emphasis on the fact, the emphasis on the text. All right, field work is fine, but how you are writing, that can go wrong. One random site and you are generalizing that the people of this community eat their ice cream like this. This was just a small example, but this is how the world again became very, very alert to two things: fieldwork and how fieldwork is being written about. Right. So these are the improvements and checks and balances which have come in the field of ethnography only to make it even more finer and even to make it more better. Because nothing replaces the fact that if we are doing a study on human beings and they have anything to do with social aspect, cultural aspect, then ethnographic research does become very important with all its negativities and challenges. So thank you very much. And I would like to now invite questions because I think I still have time.